Hey, how's it going guys? My name is Daniel, aka HashLips, and welcome back to my channel where today we are going to be creating a generator plugin. If you do not know where we are, please watch the videos in this playlist. In the previous video, we focused on creating this inputs plugin, and today we are going to create a generator that's going to consume the data from the previous plugin. So just a quick recap, in the previous video we created this word list input plugin which consumes this data, this list of words, and then give us this output, which essentially we are going to use now in our next plugin to manipulate the data and kind of start generating our end goal, which is to generate fake seed phrases. Again, these seed phrases you cannot use, they're completely made up, but it's to illustrate the power of the art engine and the use of plugins. Okay, so first things first, let's head over to the generators folder in this custom plugin section, and we're going to reuse this example generator. So this is a base generator. You can find this in the documentation as well, but we are going to change this for our use case. I think let's rename this to something saying word phrase generator. I think that's a good name because essentially we want to start constructing phrases and kind of give it some inputs and variables to make it a bit more different each time we generate. I'll show you what I mean, but essentially we want to take the words and maybe select 5 or 12 or 24 random words to construct a phrase. After renaming the file, let's go ahead and rename our class. Instead of example generator, we'll say this is our word phrase generator plugin. Now, as before, we can see that this plugin, this class, implements this generator interface, which is imported here at the top. But we also have some extra imports, so let's quickly click on Command, hold Command, and click on this interface. Okay, so this brings us to the art engine's core interfaces, and specifically the generator's core interface. So we can see that this interface implements the init function and a generate function. The init function, again, accepts some props from the art engine, which looks like this. And you can optionally use the seed, for example, for predictive randomness. And it also gets an inputs manager. This input manager is something that we'll discuss later on, but this is the class that we will use to access the data from the previous inputs plugins that ran. But we'll get to that. But moving on, as we can see also, the generator interface is generic, and we can return any type via the generate function over here. But not only does it return the type that we specify, we kind of need to return an items attribute type wrapping that type. And this is how it looks up here. It is a generic interface as well that takes in our type, our original type that we specified here. And it returns a key value pair of string. And the value is an array of these items, of these return items. Now, it is very confusing, I know. But if we go to the items property interface, it looks like this, where the data will be returned in this data property, and we specify a kind that goes with this data set. The kind will be very clear as we write out this plugin, and it will be very useful when we are writing renderer plugins later on. Now let's take a step back before you find this too technical and go and watch cat videos on YouTube. I want to bring us back and just slowly go through the generator base plugin. So we already have renamed it. We've renamed our class. And the next step for us is to actually give it a custom interface. So I'm going to rename this example custom interface into our phrase interface. And this will simply take in a phrase over here as a string, but we want this to be a string array. And this is the interface that we're going to pass to the generic. And for now, we can just replace it here as well. As we can see in the generate function, we need to return items attribute with our new custom type. Now, automatically, we can see that whatever we are returning right now doesn't work. So we are simply going to get rid of everything inside here because we are going to implement our custom logic. Let's take a look at what's happening currently. We have our class. It's implementing our beautiful interfaces, and we have the respective functions that this interface needs, although the generate function does not fulfill the interface yet, which we'll get to that. For now, let's focus on this inputs manager. We have it specified here as a variable, and we are assigning this exclamation mark, and I believe it's called a bang. Essentially, it's telling TypeScript, don't worry. If we don't have this there, it will throw an error and say, this is not defined, right? We haven't given it a value. But we put the exclamation mark there to tell TypeScript, don't worry, just chill out. We are going to give you a value when the art engine runs the init function. So we can bang it, and then this is type of inputs manager. But what is an inputs manager? Well, behind the scenes, the art engine uses these managers to manage this state. And all we need to know is that we can make use of this manager to get access to the values generated by the previous plugin. So if we look at the index.ts file, we can essentially in the generator, by the way, we can actually go and add our generator, which was called the word phrase generator, like so. We can add this one, and we can get access to this via this inputs manager. So let's see how that works. But before we can do that, we need to identify what key was used in the word so that we can actually pass it in here. For example, I would like to pass in words, and this will be our key that refers to this. Now we need to facilitate this in the constructor of our new input, so let's do that. So we can go ahead and create our constructor. Now the constructor is simply going to take in a private variable, and we're going to call this maybe our data key, and this is going to be of type string. So we already have passed our key in here as words. Let's save this file. So we're going to have our data key as words, and now simply we can now access this. So in our generator function, we can go and try and access the actual inputs data. So let's create a new constant and call this inputs data, like so. And this is going to be equal to this dot inputs manager dot get. And what we specify in the get is our data key that we just passed into this plugin. And technically, this data should be the data that is associated to this key. So it should technically be this array of word and word length objects. Now, I would love to log out this data to verify that that's the data that we are getting. But in order to run this plugin, we need to satisfy this interface. So essentially here at the top, what I'm going to do is actually, let me make a let variable, and I'm going to call this items. Now, items is going to be of type items attributes. And in here, we are going to pass in the phrase interface, and this will be just an object, okay, like so. And for now, for time being, let's create some space. We are actually just going to return the items, okay? Now, the items are empty, but I just wanted to do this so that we can go ahead and log the items or inputs. So, sorry, inputs data, like so. All right, so save this, and because we have our plugin in here, we can simply go in the terminal and run yarn start or npm start, and we should see now our log. And here it is. And indeed, it's an array of the word and the word length. So we are on the right track. So we can go back to our generator, and we know that we have access to this array of data. Great, so we have our data, we are ready to add some logic, but before we do, let's imagine what we want to happen. Well, firstly, I would like to specify to this generator how many phrases I want to generate. So maybe the amount of phrases we want to generate, and therefore it should export that amount of items to our next plugin so that the renderer can render that many phrases, right? And we would like to add some goodies such as the word length that it's allowed to use, or how many phrases should be in each phrase. But let's take it step by step and firstly specify the amount of phrases that it needs to use. So therefore, we can create a loop in here. For that, we can create a loop, and we're going to just simply say let I equals to 0. And I is going to be less than an amount. So let's just for now put 4. We'll replace that just now. And then we obviously say I plus plus. Now that is our for loop. But what is this for value going to be? Well, I think we need to be able to specify it here at the top. So let's create a new private variable. It's going to be called amount of phrases. And this will be number. So that we can replace number 4 with this dot amount of phrases, okay? And this will loop as many times as we specify how many phrases we want to generate, okay? So in our plugin where we instantiate this, let's put 2. So we're going to generate 2 sets of seed phrases, okay? And that is what this is going to do. But we have a loop now, and now we need to go and use this data. So let's go and do that. And actually, before we implement the loop, let's introduce another variable. This is going to be a private variable, and it's going to be called min word length. Now, this will be the minimum word length that we would like these seed phrases in this particular phrase to be. So maybe we want to make a seed phrase where all the words are a minimum of 5 length, okay? This is going to be interesting for us to do, so let's go and add that as well. Let's say we want a minimum of 5 letters per word. And let's save this file. Let's go back here. And now we're going to make use of this in this loop. Firstly, let's create a constant variable called filtered words. Now, filtered words is going to be the filtered words list taking in consideration the minimum word length so that we only use the objects, as we can see here from our previous log, of the word length that's higher than the amount that we specified. So we can say that, and we're going to get this from the inputs data dot filter, and we're going to get the word, I would call it word object, I would guess, and this can be type of any, but essentially it's type of this. For now we can just specify any because we know what it is. And what we would like to return here is essentially the word itself. So we're going to say the word dot word length, okay, should be greater or equal to this dot min word length. Now this should give us back a filtered word list where the list is only going to be of the size of 5 and up because we specified 5 here. And if we want to test this out, we can certainly do that by logging the filtered word list. Let's clear our terminal, run this, and we can see that all the words that we get is 5 and up. And that is working wonderfully. So let's remove our log. And now we can start focusing on creating the words that is going to be selected for this particular phrase. So we're going to start off with a constant, and we're going to say selected words, like so. And this will be an array. We don't know what's going to be populated yet, but we do need to create some kind of for loop here again. And this time we're going to loop over our list and create a random selection function that will populate this array. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to now say for. This time we need to use maybe j because we can't use I. We already used that. This is going to be j, should be less than a number. We're going to use for again. We're going to replace that soon. And j plus plus. So now we have our nested loop, but this for variable, what does this need to be? Well, essentially this loop will give us the amount of words that's actually in our phrase. And I would like to make this a private variable as well. So this time we're going to specify that we have another number, and this is going to be words in a phrase. Okay, and that's what we're going to replace this for with the words in phrase. And that way we can also make this dynamic, right? So we're going to start off by saying we're going to create a 12-word seed phrase, right? So that's where we can specify that. Let's save this file, save this as well, and create some space for our for loop to start creating the random selection. Now, to select a random word, what we can do is create a random index, and that we can get by running math.floor, because we just want a floored value. And we're going to again say that we want to get the math.random, and that's going to be times by the filtered words.length up here. Okay, this should give us a random index, which we can now push to our selected words. So we can say selected words.push, and we need to remember that we're going to get the filtered words, and this will be our random index, and from that we're going to grab the word because it is here. Okay, and so next what we want to do is actually go to the filtered words, okay, and splice this index off. So we want to say random index, and we're going to splice this off so that we make sure that we don't select it again. And that is it. So now we are busy populating this selected words array with our random selection. Now that we have looped over and we have created our selected words array, what do we need to do next? Well, it's time for us to populate this items object, which we can do down here. So we can say items and the item I, so whatever iteration we are at, and this will actually be an array, because if we look at our interface, it needs to be an array of these item attributes that we return. Okay, so essentially we're going to return an object, and if we remember, this had a kind, which is of type string, and then it had data, which we need to populate now. And this data is of type phrase interface, which has a phrase and a string array. So all we need to do is say that this is our phrase, and the string array will be our selected words. Now this is satisfied, but we need to put something in the kind. And what I'm going to put in here is word phrase generator v1. This can be any string, but the following plugins will look at this to determine what data this is and if it can use it. And the reason is because this object is in an array, but it might be populated or sit amongst other data variables based on other plugins that ran at the same level as this one. So that's why we add a kind for certain plugins to distinguish the data. If it's there, it can make use of it. Also, an important aspect to understand is that sometimes generators can even output multiple different data sets with maybe different definers over here, because maybe this was some kind of number, and if I can just spell number correctly, and maybe this was some kind of number, and we want to use this number in the renderer in a special way if it picks up that this was the kind. And you'll see that happen in the image generator example from the core plugin. It actually exports attributes and layers for the images so that the renderers can use them at their own accord. So that is what you can do with generators as well. For us, this is perfectly fine, and we are actually now going to run it and see what this outputs and fills in for us in this cache file. So let's go ahead and close all of our files that we have open and focus on the index.ts, where our new word phrase generator lives. Now we are saying that we want to make use of the inputs. We're going to generate two of these kind of sequences or phrases. It's going to be only words that's 5 of length and upwards, and we're going to generate 12 words for each phrase. So if I go ahead and run yarn start, we should see it run, And if we now look in the generator's file, there we go. We get these items, which has an ID. It is of an array, and well, this array, and each one has an object in it with a kind, so we know what data type this is, and the data has the phrase with the 12 words. Now let's play around with the settings. Let's say we only want words that's 7 and upwards, and we maybe want to create 24 words. I don't even know if we have enough words to do this, but let's run it and see, and it did generate. So we get words that's of length 7 and upwards, and there's 24 in each phrase. Let's turn this back to 12 and actually put this to 0 and see that it can use a variety of word lengths, still giving us a 12 seed phrase. Generally, I think seed phrases are of words 4 and upwards, but I'm going to keep it like this so that we can use this for the next video where we are going to create the renderer plugin. But as you can see, it works. Just to tie everything up so you understand where we are right now, we've created in the previous video an inputs plugin. In this video, we created a word phrase generator that makes use of this data from the inputs plugin. And our new generator generates the data and converts it into this format. And now we're going to move on to create a renderer. And our renderer is going to kind of make use of this data, create its own JSON file, but also save these actual files in a cache folder in this cache file system. And that's going to be important for us to use, because although we don't need it for this example, some people might need it when they work with different media formats. As always, I really hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to like this video, comment below what you like about particularly writing this generator, and if you are going to try it out yourself. Anyways, I hope you have a fantastic day. Cheers for now. See you in the next video.